The air in the doctor's waiting room was stale. It smelled of antiseptic and old magazines. I shifted on the hard green plastic chair, the cold seeping through my Sunday dress. I am Evelyn Hayes, 71 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew my daughter. The room was quiet, save for the ticking of a clock and a man coughing into his fist. I was just 71, but in that room, I felt ancient. My heart had been broken for 6 months, ever since my Samuel passed. My phone buzzed against the silence, a harsh sound in the sterile room. A nearby woman jumped, glaring at me over her glasses. I fumbled in my old leather purse for it. The screen lit up. Denise, my only child. A small, tired smile touched my lips. Maybe she was calling to check on me. Denise, honey, how are... Mom. Her voice wasn't warm. It was cold as ice, sharp as glass. We're going to Europe tomorrow, Marcus and I. I froze, my hand tightening on the phone. Europe? What? What's the occasion, baby? You didn't mention... Business, she snapped, her voice clipped and impatient. Listen, I don't have time. I already sold your beach house. And your car. We needed the money. The room tilted. The ticking of the clock seemed to grow louder, deafening me. What did you say? I sold them, she repeated, slower this time, as if speaking to a child. The house on Tybee. The truck. It's done. We needed the money. Bye. Click. She hung up. Just like that. I stared at the black screen of my phone. The silence of the room rushed back in, pressing against my ears. 45 years. 45 years of raising her, of sacrificing, of making her Sunday dresses by hand because we couldn't afford the store-bought ones. And she discarded me like I was garbage. I lowered the phone slowly to my lap. My hands weren't shaking. That was the strangest part. I felt nothing. Just a hollow, frozen calm. The man across from me coughed again. A deep, rattling sound. I didn't even flinch. Denise was all I had left. My husband, my Samuel, had passed away 6 months ago. It happened right at the kitchen table. He was pouring me a cup of coffee, just as he had done every morning for 45 years. He had served me coffee with cream and toast. He'd kissed my forehead, his mustache ticking my skin. Good morning, my love, he'd said. Those were his last words. Since the funeral, Denise had been so present in my life, or so I believed. She came to our little house in Atlanta 3 times a week. She was the dutiful, grieving daughter. She helped me with the funeral arrangements, handling the paperwork I was too fogged with grief to even read. When I'd cry, she'd pat my back. It's okay, Mom. I'll take care of everything. She accompanied me to the grocery store. She even insisted I see this doctor for a general checkup. Mom, you need to take better care of yourself now that you're alone, she'd said, flashing that bright, beautiful smile I thought was pure love. I understood now. It was convenience. It was a performance. She needed to make sure I was healthy enough to be left behind. She needed me out of the way, sitting in this cold room while she finalized the theft. The beach house. My heart ached for the wood and nails, not the money. Our little sanctuary on Tybee Island. Samuel and I bought it when Denise was 15. We saved for a decade. He drove that bus route for 40 years, his hands calloused and strong, and I stretched every single dollar until it screamed. Every summer we'd go there. We built memories in that salty air. We celebrated birthdays and Christmases. Denise would bring her boyfriends, and later, her slick, smiling husband, Marcus. I would cook for everyone, collard greens and fried fish. I'd clean up the sand they tracked in. I'd do the laundry while they all relaxed on the porch Samuel built with his own 2 hands. It was our family tradition. I never thought she'd see it as just money. I never thought she'd see me as just an obstacle. And the car. My breath hitched. That old dented Ford pickup truck. Samuel cared for that truck like it was his own child. He'd be out there every Sunday morning, bucket and sponge in hand, washing it down. He changed the oil religiously. He always parked it in the same spot, under the shade of the big oak tree in our front yard. Denise knew what that truck meant to me. It was the last thing I had left of him. His scent of motor oil and peppermints. It still lingered on the cloth seats. She sold his scent. She sold my last connection to him for a trip to Europe. Mrs. Hayes? I looked up. My eyes were dry. A young nurse with kind eyes was standing by a doorway. Mrs. Evelyn Hayes? The doctor will see you now. I stood up. My legs felt like hollow sticks, but my spine felt like steel. I followed her down the hallway, the smell of antiseptic burning my nose. I sat in the exam room. The doctor examined me. He said I was in good health for my age, that my heart was strong. He said I just needed to rest more and eat better. I nodded. I smiled. But my mind was miles away. It was back home, in my bedroom. Because in that moment, as the doctor droned on about blood pressure, I remembered something I had completely forgotten. 3 days before he died, Samuel had come in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd handed me a thick yellow manila envelope. His hand, so strong and warm, closed over mine. "Evelyn," he said, and his voice was serious in a way that scared me a little. "Put this in the drawer of your dresser, under your good linens." "What is it, Samuel?" I'd asked. "Just something I've been working on. If something happens to me, I want you to open it." He paused, looking deep into my eyes. "But only when you feel ready, when you feel strong." I had put it away without much thought. After the funeral, with so much grief and so many arrangements, with Denise handling everything, I simply forgot. I smiled at the doctor. It was a real smile this time, a slow, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. My daughter thought she had left me with nothing. She thought she had taken it all. But what Denise didn't know, what she never knew, was that Samuel, my dear, quiet Samuel, had always been a man who planned ahead. I whispered to myself as the doctor turned to write a prescription. I think I'm ready now. The doctor patted my hand, his voice a distant hum. "You're strong as an ox, Mrs. Hayes. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I smiled, a thin, papery movement of my lips. "Thank you, doctor." I walked out of the exam room, down the sterile hallway, and pushed open the heavy glass doors of the clinic. The Atlanta sun hit me like a physical blow, hot and blindingly bright. I walked past the handicap ramp and onto the sidewalk. My feet, in my good Sunday shoes, already ached. I looked at the curb where Denise was supposed to be waiting. It was empty. Of course it was. I turned right, toward the bus stop a quarter mile down the street. I clutched my old leather purse to my chest and began to walk, my head held high. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. I climbed the steps slowly, my knees aching in protest. I paid my fare in coins, my hands steady. I sat by a window streaked with grime. The city blurred past, brick buildings, busy people, lives I knew nothing about. My mind was not on the scenery. It was on the papers, the stack of papers Denise had brought over, just days after we put Samuel in the ground. I saw her clearly, sitting at my kitchen table, her face a perfect mask of grief. "Mom, this is just for the estate," she'd whispered, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly dry. "It's just to settle Samuel's accounts, to make sure his pension is handled." I had been in a fog, adrift in a sea of grief. I trusted her. She was my baby. "Don't you worry your pretty head about it," she'd cooed, pushing the pen into my numb fingers. "Just sign here, and here, and here." I had signed. I had signed away my life, and I hadn't even read the words. I signed the power of attorney. I signed the title to the truck. I gave her the keys to my entire world. The bus shuddered to a stop, picking up a young woman with a baby. The doctor's visit. The timing was suddenly, sickeningly clear. Mom, you look so tired. You need a checkup. She hadn't cared about my health. She needed me out of the house. She needed me sitting in that cold, sterile waiting room. She needed me distracted, pinned in one spot, while the buyers came, while they inspected the truck, while they walked through my beach house, while they put their hands on Samuel's things. My stomach twisted, a cold, hard knot of shame and rage. I wasn't grieving the money. I knew how to be poor. I had been poor most of my life. I was grieving the meaning. That old Ford truck. It wasn't just metal. It was Samuel, sleeves rolled up on a Saturday, whistling as he polished the chrome. It was the smell of him, motor oil, peppermints, and the faint scent of the soap he used. It was the passenger seat, worn down in the exact shape of me. It was where he taught Denise how to drive, his hand steady on the wheel, hers shaking. Easy, baby girl, he chuckled. Just feel the road. She sold that. She sold the memory of her father's hands teaching her the world. The beach house on Tybee Island. My eyes blurred, not with tears, but with the sharp image of the front porch. The blue paint, peeling in the salt air. The screen door that always slammed shut with a satisfying thwack. I saw Denise as a little girl, 5 years old, her hair in pigtails, running barefoot from the water. She'd be screaming with laughter, tracking sand all over the floor I had just swept. I saw Samuel at the grill, the smoke rising into the twilight, his voice booming as he called, "Supper's ready." She didn't just sell wood and nails. She sold the sound of our laughter. She sold the scent of Samuel's barbecue smoke. She sold 40 years of our family's heart. The bus hissed to a stop at my corner. "Ma'am, this is Peachtree Heights," the driver called. I nodded, pulling myself back. "Thank you." I stepped off the bus. The walk to my house was only a block, but it felt like a mile. My little brick house looked the same. The azaleas Samuel planted were in bloom, a riot of pink and white, but the driveway was empty, the spot under the big oak tree where the truck should have been. It was just a patch of bare grass and oil stains, a scar on the earth. It was real. She had truly done it. I fumbled for my house key, my hand finally starting to tremble. I pushed the key into the lock and turned. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It was filled with Samuel's silence, a silence that had been my comfort for 6 months. Now it felt different. It felt empty. I stepped inside and closed the door, locking the deadbolt behind me. I did not go to the kitchen for a glass of water. I did not sit in the living room in Samuel's favorite chair. I walked past the silent rooms, my feet sure on the hardwood floor. I went straight to the master bedroom, where the afternoon light cut stripes across the old quilt. I stopped in front of the dark mahogany dresser, the one Samuel had bought at an antique store our first year married. My hand, wrinkled but steady, rose up. I placed my palm flat against the cold, smooth wood of the top drawer. The envelope was in there, under my good linens. "Only when you feel ready," Samuel had said, "when you feel strong." I took a deep breath. I was not strong. I was broken, but I was also furious. And sometimes fury is all the strength you need. I wrapped my fingers around the brass handle, and I pulled the drawer open. My hand hovered over the drawer. It was trembling, just slightly. For a moment, I was afraid of what was inside that envelope, afraid of a secret Samuel had kept. But I was far more afraid of what my daughter had just done. I could see the thick manila envelope resting on a stack of my good lavender-scented linens. I reached for it, but my hand stopped. A face flashed in my mind, not Denise's. Her husband, Marcus. Marcus, with his slick, expensive shoes that always squeaked on my hardwood floors. Marcus, with his smile that never ever reached his cold eyes. He'd been whispering in her ear for years. I saw it. I didn't want to see it. I remembered him, just 2 months ago, standing in my living room. His eyes weren't looking at me. They were scanning the furniture. "This is a big house, Evelyn," he'd said, his voice smooth as oil. "Awful big for just one woman to rattle around in." I remember Denise laughing, a nervous sound. "Oh, Marcus, stop." But she hadn't disagreed. My hand closed around the envelope. The paper was crisp, dry. The memory was so clear now, the fog of grief finally lifting, revealing the ugly truth beneath. It was the week after the funeral. This very room was filled with sympathy cards and wilting flower arrangements. I was sitting in Samuel's chair, wrapped in his old robe, feeling like I was underwater. Denise and Marcus came over. They sat at the kitchen table, their faces set in practiced, solemn expressions. "Mom," Denise said, her voice soft, we have to handle the estate. The bank needs signatures." Marcus pushed a stack of papers across the table, a thick, intimidating stack. "It's just legal stuff, Mom," Denise whispered, her hand resting on mine. Her skin was warm, but her touch felt cold. To settle Samuel's accounts, to make sure his pension is handled. I can't read this, baby," I had whispered, my eyes blurry with tears. "My head is just spinning." "I know, Mom. Don't you worry your pretty head about it," she'd cooed. Marcus slid a pen into my numb fingers. "I've marked all the spots," Denise said. "Just sign here, and here, and here." I looked at her, my daughter, my only child. I trusted her. I signed. My signature, shaky and frail, on page after page. I realized it now, standing in the silent bedroom, the envelope in my hand. I hadn't been signing pension forms. I'd been signing a power of attorney. I had been signing the title to Samuel's truck. I had been signing my own death warrant. A cold, sharp horror pierced through the numbness. I had given her the weapon. I had loaded the gun myself. Ring, ring. The sudden sound of the telephone in the hallway made me jump, a choked cry escaping my throat. I dropped the envelope back into the drawer as if it were on fire. Ring, ring. It was her. It had to be. I walked slowly out of the bedroom, my feet heavy. I looked at the phone on the hall table, ringing and ringing, demanding my attention. Maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe it was all a terrible mistake. My hand closed over the receiver. I picked it up. "Hello? Mom!" "Oh, good, I caught you." Her voice. It was different. It wasn't the cold, sharp voice from the clinic. It was gone. In its place was the sweet, bubbly voice of my little girl, the voice she used when she wanted something. It was sickeningly sweet. "I'm at the airport. We're just about to board. It's so exciting." I said nothing. I just held the phone, my knuckles white. "Listen," she chirped. "I just wanted to call and say I knew you'd understand. You've always been so supportive." "Supportive," I whispered. The word tasted like ash. "Yes. And I wanted to tell you, we wired you your share. 30% of the sale. We're keeping the rest for the business, of course." She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The smile of a predator that has just secured its meal. That's more than fair, right? I gripped the old beige receiver. The plastic was cool against my skin. 30%, I repeated, my voice flat, hollow, of my own home, of Samuel's truck. Denise let out a little laugh, a high tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Mom, don't be so dramatic." It's just stuff. You've been rattling around that old house for months. It's our home, I managed to say. It was, she corrected me, her voice losing its sweetness and taking on that sharp, impatient edge again. Honestly, we're doing you a favor. Marcus has this huge business opportunity in Europe. This is funding our future. We can't let old memories get in the way of that. My future, I thought. What about my future? With the 30%, you can use the money to find a nice little apartment, she continued, her voice all magnanimous. Something more fitting for your needs. You don't need all that space. She was telling me what my needs were. She, who had just stolen the roof from over my head, was telling me what I needed. I see, I said. My voice was surprisingly calm, distant. I felt like I was floating somewhere above my own body, watching this strange, cold woman talk to her mother. Well, have a safe trip, honey. There was a pause. She was probably surprised I hadn't burst into tears that I hadn't begged. Oh, well, okay. Great, she said, recovering. I knew you'd understand. I'll call you when we land in Paris. Love you, Mom. Goodbye, Denise, I said. I placed the receiver back into its cradle with a gentle click. I stood there in the hallway. The house was utterly silent. I stared at the floral wallpaper Samuel and I had put up in 1983. Then a sound bubbled up from my chest. It started as a low rumble, a vibration I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't a sob. It wasn't a cry. It was a laugh. I laughed. It was a cold, bitter, rattling sound that echoed in the empty hallway. It was the laugh of a woman who had just seen the punchline to a joke that had taken 71 years to tell. I laughed until my stomach ached, until the silence of the house felt thick and heavy. I stopped abruptly. The humor was gone, replaced by a glacial calm. I walked to the small desk in the corner of the living room, where Samuel used to keep his papers. I sat down and turned on the old desktop computer. It whirred to life, slow and protesting. I opened my bank account online. The page loaded, line by line. There it was. A new deposit. The pittance. The 30%. It was an amount that was an insult to the land, an insult to the wood, an insult to the 45 years of love and labor we had poured into that home. They hadn't even gotten a good price. They had sold it fast and cheap. They had sold my life for a discount. I stared at the number, and the coldness in my heart solidified into something hard and sharp, like a diamond. Ding dong. The sound of the doorbell chimed through the house, making me jump. I closed the web browser. I stood up, smoothing the front of my dress. Ding dong. Just a minute, I called out, my voice sounding normal, cheerful even. I walked to the front door and peered through the peephole. It was my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Bessie. She was standing on my porch, her brow furrowed with concern. In her hands, she held her signature Pyrex casserole dish, the one with the blue cornflowers. It was covered in aluminum foil. Pity. She was bringing me pity in a dish. "Oh, Evelyn, honey," she called through the door, her voice muffled. I heard the news. I saw the truck was gone. I took a deep breath, fixing a sad, frail smile onto my face. I unlocked the deadbolt. It was time to play the part they had written for me. I opened the door. The smell of baked macaroni and cheese immediately hit me, thick and heavy. Mrs. Bessie stood there, her face a mask of practiced sympathy. She was a good woman, but she was also the neighborhood's chief information officer. "Oh, Evelyn, honey," she said, bustling past me into the entryway. She didn't wait for an invitation. She set the hot dish down on the hall table right next to the phone. "I saw that truck was gone," she whispered, her voice conspiratorial. And then Dorothy from the corner store said she saw Denise And that slick husband of hers loading suitcases into a cab this morning. She tisked, a sound like a dry leaf skittering on pavement. That girl of yours, she didn't leave you, did she? Just leaving you here with nothing. I forced my hands to clasp together, to look frail. I lowered my eyes, playing the part of the grieving, abandoned mother. She had a business opportunity, Bessie, I murmured. In Europe. Europe. Mrs. Bessie's voice was sharp. And she took Samuel's truck to Europe? And the beach house? I heard she sold that too. She knew. Of course she knew. Evelyn, honey, how are you going to manage? Her eyes roamed my living room, as if already appraising what little was left to sell. After all you did for that girl, raised her practically by yourself while Samuel drove that bus. The sacrifices. I had to sit and listen. I had to stand in my own hallway, in the house I owned, and listen to this woman pity me. Each word was a small, sharp stone. I was no longer Evelyn Hayes, Samuel's wife, mistress of my own home. I was poor Evelyn, a charity case, a story to be whispered about over fences and cups of coffee. If you need anything, dear. Anything, she said, patting my arm. Her touch felt heavy. A ride to the store. Some leftovers. You just call me. Thank you, Bessie, I said, my voice quiet. You're very kind. She gave me one last look, a long, lingering assessment. You just take care of yourself, you hear? I will. She finally left, pulling the door closed behind her with a soft click. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the door. The humiliation was a physical thing. It was a hot, bitter bile that rose in my throat. It burned away the last 6 months of fog. It burned away the grief. My sadness, which had been a heavy, wet blanket, suddenly went up in flames, and in its place was something cold, something hard. Resolve. I was not a victim. I was not poor Evelyn. I was Samuel Hayes's wife, and I was not going to be managed or pitied or discarded. This was my house. That was my money. And that was my daughter, who had made a very, very serious mistake. I turned from the door. I walked past Mrs. Bessie's pity casserole, the smell of it now making me sick. I locked the front door. I slid the deadbolt. I latched the chain. I walked with purpose, my back straight, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I went straight back to the master bedroom. I stood in front of the mahogany dresser. I opened the drawer. I looked at the thick manila envelope resting on my good linens. When you feel strong, Samuel had said. I was strong now. I grabbed the envelope. I tore the metal clasp open with a sharp, ripping sound. I pulled the contents out onto the bed, my hands shaking. It wasn't just one document. It was a thick stack, bound with a rubber band. Bank certificates, stock portfolios, official-looking deeds, and on top, a letter, a simple white envelope, just like the ones he used for birthday cards. My name was on the front, written in his familiar neat handwriting, Evelyn. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sat on the edge of the bed, the old quilt cool beneath my legs. I opened the letter. My dearest Evelyn, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. And it means you are in a place where you need to be strong. My vision blurred. I wiped my eyes, angry at the tears. Forgive me, my love, for not telling you all of this while I was alive. I never wanted you to worry about money. I just wanted you to be happy. I know you thought I was just a simple bus driver, and I was. I loved that job. I loved our simple life. But I invested, I stopped. I read that line again. I invested. Every penny we saved, Evelyn. Every overtime shift. Every time we packed a lunch instead of eating out. I didn't just put it in a savings account. I made it work. We are not just comfortable, my love. We are rich. The word hung in the silent room. Rich. It seemed absurd. I didn't want the money to change us. I didn't want it to change Denise. I wanted her to love us for us, not for what we had. A cold, bitter laugh escaped me. Oh, Samuel, if only you knew. I set everything up through a lawyer, a good man named Mr. Dubois. His number's in here. The company. I named it after my first love. I frowned. His first love? Robert Investments, Incorporated. It was my mother's maiden name, Robert. My head was spinning. I set the letter aside and picked up the stack of documents. My hands trembled as I shuffled through the papers. Bank statements. Not from our local savings and loan, but from private banks downtown. The numbers. They had too many commas, too many zeros. My eyes just couldn't make sense of them. It looked like a telephone number, stock certificates, shares in companies I'd only heard of on the news, and the deeds. Deed after deed after deed. A small condo downtown, a strip mall out by the highway, a piece of land near the airport. 1, 2, 3, 6 properties. 6. My daughter had sold my beach house, thinking it was the only thing I had. I held up the final document. It was the thickest one. It was the deed to a 20-story apartment building, a luxury high-rise, gleaming glass and steel. My breath caught in my throat. I knew this building. I had been there for Denise's housewarming party. I read the name on the deed, Buckhead Towers, LLC. It was the luxury apartment building where Denise and Marcus lived. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. The papers were spread out around me like a fortress. My hands, which had trembled with weakness in the doctor's office, were now perfectly steady. She lives in my building, I said. I spoke the words out loud to the empty, quiet room. They tasted like iron and power. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, Mrs. Bessie's cold casserole sitting uneaten on the counter. I read Samuel's letter until I had it memorized. I studied the deeds. I studied the account numbers. By sunrise, I was no longer Evelyn Hayes, the poor, grieving widow. I was Evelyn Hayes, the president and CEO of Robert Investments, Incorporated. I did not call Denise. Her plane was probably landing in Paris, filled with my money and her own ugly lies. I let her go, flying straight into the web. Instead, I found the crisp, embossed business card tucked inside Samuel's letter. Mr. Dubois, attorney at law, Robert Investments, Incorporated. There was a downtown Atlanta address and a phone number. At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, I picked up the phone. I dialed. A deep, professional voice answered on the first ring. Dubois. Mr. Dubois, I said, and my voice was as clear and strong as a church bell. My name is Evelyn Hayes. I was Samuel Hayes' wife. There was a short, sharp intake of breath. Mrs. Hayes? Yes. I've been expecting your call for 6 months. I'm so very sorry for your loss. Samuel was a fine man. Thank you, I said, my voice polite but cold. I need to see you. Today. Of course, he said, the surprise evident in his tone. I can clear my schedule. Shall we say 10 in the morning? I'll be there. But I couldn't sit still for 2 hours. There was something else I had to do first. I had to see the wound. I put on my good walking shoes, locked my house, and walked to the bus stop. I took the bus to the main MARTA station. From there, I bought a ticket for the long-haul bus to the coast. 4 hours. 4 hours of watching the Georgia pines blur past, the heavy envelope of documents sitting in my purse like a stone. When I stepped off the bus on Tybee Island, the salt air hit me. It smelled like home. It smelled like Samuel. It smelled like memory. I walked the half-mile from the bus stop to our little street. And then I saw it. My heart clenched, a fist squeezing all the air from my lungs. Our little blue beach house. And there was a white moving van parked in the driveway. Strangers. A young couple, maybe in their 30s, were carrying boxes up the steps. My steps. The steps Samuel had built with his own 2 hands. I must have looked like a ghost. The young woman stopped, a box labeled kitchen in her arms. She smiled at me, a kind, worried smile. "Can I help you, ma'am? Are you lost?" I couldn't find my voice. I just pointed, my hand trembling again. I used to know the owners. I was a friend. The woman's face fell. All the joy vanished from it. "Oh," she said, lowering her voice to a sympathetic whisper. "Oh, you must be a friend of Mrs. Hayes." I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. It's such a terrible situation," she said, shaking her head. "We feel awful about it. We just bought the house last week, you see." Her daughter Denise handled the sale. The woman continued, stepping closer. "She told us her mother, well, that she was very, very sick, in the hospital in Atlanta." The world tilted. The sound of the ocean faded to a dull roar. She said, the woman went on, her voice full of pure, honest pity, that Mrs. Hayes needed to sell fast, to pay for the medical bills. She was losing everything. We thought we were helping. My blood didn't just run cold. It turned to ice. Denise hadn't just stolen from me. She buried me. She didn't just take my property. She took my name, my reputation, my life. She had painted me to the world as sick, incompetent, and dying. I looked at this kind young woman who thought she was doing a good deed for a dying old lady. "This," I said, my voice a dry rasp I barely recognized. "This changes everything." I did not go back home. I got right back on the bus. The 4-hour ride back to Atlanta was not a journey of grief. It was a journey of ice. Sick, dying, losing everything. My daughter hadn't just stolen from me. She had erased me. She had murdered my character to strangers to make a quick, dirty dollar. I arrived in downtown Atlanta just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the skyscrapers in gold and orange. The address on the card wasn't a small, dusty office. It was a tower of glass and steel that scraped the clouds. Mr. Dubois' office was on the 40th floor. The reception area was silent, carpeted in thick, plush gray that swallowed the sound of my sensible shoes. The receptionist looked at me, an old woman in a simple Sunday dress, with polite confusion. "Evelyn Hayes," I said, my voice clear, "for Mr. Dubois." "Of course, Mrs. Hayes," she said, her eyes widening just a fraction. "He's waiting for you." Mr. Dubois was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a suit so sharp it could cut. He was not the old, dusty lawyer I had pictured. He was all quiet energy and intelligence. He didn't offer me pity. He offered me a firm handshake. "Mrs. Hayes, it is an honor. I am deeply sorry for your loss." Samuel was a brilliant man. "He was," I said. "Please sit." His office was vast. One entire wall was a sheet of glass, looking down on the whole of Atlanta. The desk was made of dark, shining wood, and it was completely empty, except for a single file. I sat in the soft leather chair. I placed the manila envelope, now worn from my journey, on his gleaming desk. "I found this," I said, "and I have just returned from Tybee Island. My daughter Denise sold my home, claiming I was dying and needed money for medical bills." Mr. Dubois nodded slowly. His expression was not surprise. It was confirmation. "As I said, Mrs. Hayes, your husband was a brilliant man, and a very discreet one. He was my client for 20 years. He opened the single file on his desk. "Samuel didn't just invest, Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice calm and precise. "He built an empire. Robert Investments is not a small holding company. It is a major player in Atlanta real estate." He turned a page. "You are, quite frankly, One of the wealthiest women in this city. The words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. I just stared at him. The accounts, the properties. Everything is in perfect order. You are the sole beneficiary, the sole owner. I have been managing the estate, waiting for your instructions. My voice was a whisper. The building, the Buckhead Towers. He nodded again, a small grim smile on his face. Yes, you own that building, free and clear. Your daughter and her husband are, technically, your tenants. My breath came out, long and slow. I owned her. My daughter, I said, my voice like ice. She committed fraud. She had me sign papers when I couldn't even see straight. She sold my home. She sold Samuel's truck. Mr. Dubois leaned forward. His kind eyes were gone, replaced by the sharp gaze of a predator. Yes, he said. I've been monitoring the estate. I saw the illegal sale of the Tybee property. I saw the transfer of the truck title. It is blatant criminal fraud. He steepled his fingers. We can file an injunction this evening. We can notify the authorities in Paris. We can have the Atlanta police meet them at the airport when they return. We can have them arrested. Arrested? My daughter? My baby girl in handcuffs. I saw her face, laughing at the airport. I saw her, a 5-year-old on the beach, covered in sand. I held up a hand. The afternoon sun, setting behind me, cast a long shadow across his desk. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the magnificent room. Mr. Dubois raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Hayes? No arrests. Not yet. I leaned forward, my eyes meeting his, 2 chips of ice. I don't want to file charges. I want to teach my daughter a lesson. I want to teach her about respect. Mr. Dubois leaned back in his massive leather chair. He didn't smile, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, and suddenly full of a keen interest. I'm listening, Mrs. Hayes. The way he said Mrs. Hayes was different. It wasn't the polite term for a grieving widow. It was the address for the owner of the building. First, I said, my voice as steady as the steel girders holding up his office. The fraudulent sale of my home on Tybee Island. I want it back. Mr. Dubois nodded once. A sharp, decisive motion. That is the easy part. Easy? The sale was based on blatant fraud. Your daughter had no legal right to sell it, as it was jointly held property in trust. The power of attorney she used is irrelevant in this matter. He made a quick note on a pristine legal pad. I can have the sale nullified and voided by the end of the week. The buyers, the poor couple you spoke to, will be refunded in full from one of your, larger accounts. Good, I said. I want them made whole. They were innocent in this. They were victims of her lie, too. Consider it done, he said. What is next? Second, I continued, Samuel's truck. Mr. Dubois' expression tightened. That is harder. Why? I demanded. The house was real estate, protected by the trust Samuel set up. The truck is chattel, personal property. He leaned forward. And the power of attorney she tricked you into signing did give her the authority to sell it. She is your legal agent. My heart, which had felt so strong, faltered. So, it's gone? We can't get it back. We can't just void the sale, he clarified. But we can prove the POA itself was obtained under fraudulent pretenses. We can sue her. No, I said immediately. No lawsuits against her. Not yet. It's too public. It's not the lesson. Mr. Dubois looked at me, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. There is another way. A simpler way. We find the buyer, and we buy it back. My eyes hardened. Of course. We would use the very thing she was chasing. Money. Then do it, I ordered. Find that truck. Find the buyer. Pay them double what they paid her. Pay them triple. My voice dropped, the ice returning. I don't care what it costs. I want Samuel's truck. I want it back in my driveway. I want it sitting under that oak tree when she comes crawling home. Mr. Dubois made another note. Consider it done. I'll have my investigators on it immediately. Is that all? I stood up. I walked to the giant wall of glass, looking down at the city lights just beginning to twinkle, thousands of feet below. I was above them all. No, I said, my back to him. There is one more thing. The most important thing. I turned to face him, a small old woman silhouetted against the vast wealth of Atlanta, the Buckhead Towers. Yes? You said I'm the owner, but that you've been managing it. I want that to change. My voice was quiet, but it was not a request. It was a command. Mr. Dubois, I want you to immediately gain direct administrative control of that building. I don't want to be a silent partner anymore. I want to be the one who signs the papers. Weeks began to blur. One melted into the next, and I settled into the strangest routine of my life. I lived two lives. To the outside world, to my Atlanta neighbors like Mrs. Bessie, I was poor, sweet Evelyn. I accepted her tuna casseroles with a grateful, trembling hand. I accepted her rides to the grocery store, my voice frail. "Oh, you're looking a little thin, honey," she'd say, patting my arm as we stood in the checkout line. "You're just wasting away from grief. It's a sin what that girl did." "I'm managing, Bessie," I'd murmur, playing my part to perfection. The good Lord provides. But the moment my front door was locked, the moment the chain was drawn, poor Evelyn vanished. I would walk to the kitchen, pour myself a tall glass of iced tea, and sit at the table with Samuel's files. I was no longer a widow. I was the president of Robert Investments. I spent my afternoons on the phone with Mr. Dubois, my voice crisp and clear. I learned about escrow and asset management and corporate liability. I, who had only ever managed a household budget, was now learning to manage an empire. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the bedroom, polishing Samuel's good leather shoes, a ritual I still couldn't give up. The phone rang. I picked it up on the second ring. "Hayes." "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes." Mr. Dubois' voice was sharp, professional. "I have news. The Tybee Island matter is resolved." My hand, holding the polishing cloth, went still. "Go on. The sale has been officially nullified. The court recognized the fraud immediately. The buyers, the young couple you met, have been fully refunded. And the house?" I asked, my voice tight. "The deed is clean. The keys are being messengered to my office as we speak. The house is yours again, Mrs. Hayes, free and clear." I closed my eyes, one hand resting on Samuel's worn shoe. One piece of our life reclaimed. "Thank you, Mr. Dubois. That is excellent news." "I am not finished," he said. I could hear the smile in his voice. "The truck." My breath caught. "What about it?" "My investigator found it yesterday. Denise sold it to a private collector out in Marietta, a man who loves old Fords." "And?" I pushed, impatient. And Mr. Dubois continued. "The collector was a reasonable man. When I explained that the truck was sentimental, and when I offered him 3 times what he paid for it." "He agreed," I whispered. "He said, 'Money is money, but a man's last truck. That's something different.'" He agreed to the sale. "It is being delivered by a flatbed, Mrs. Hayes." He paused, letting the victory land. "It should be arriving tonight, after dark, as you requested." Tears, hot and sudden, pricked the back of my eyes. Not tears of grief, tears of victory. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "Thank you for bringing him home." I hung up the phone. I looked across the room at the framed photo of Samuel on the dresser. He was smiling, his arm around a teenage Denise at the beach. "We got them back, Samuel," I whispered to the photo. We got them back. I stood there for one long, sweet moment, savoring the win. But the game wasn't over. I picked up the phone again. I dialed Mr. Dubois. He answered on the first ring. Mrs. Hayes? Mr. Dubois, I said, my voice now cold as steel. 2 pieces are back on the board. It's time for the third. Is the building secure? As of yesterday morning, he replied. I have finalized the administrative transfer. You have full direct control. You are, for all legal purposes, the landlord. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. A smile Samuel would never have recognized. Good. Now, prepare the eviction notice. I heard the silence on the other end of the line. It was heavy, thick with judgment. Mrs. Hayes? Mr. Dubois' voice was cautious, as if he was speaking to a woman on a ledge. An eviction notice? For your daughter? She is a tenant in my building, I stated, my voice void of all emotion. A tenant who is in violation of her lease. I believe her husband, Mr. Marcus, is listed as the primary leaseholder. But she's in Europe. A trip she financed by fraudulent means, I said, cutting him off. That is not my concern. My concern is my property. My voice was ice. I want the notice prepared immediately. She has 30 days. Standard legal procedure. I added one final crucial instruction. Send it via certified mail, Mr. Dubois. I want it delivered by hand. I want her to have to sign for it herself. This was no longer just business. This was an education. And the first lesson was about to be delivered. And Mr. Dubois, I continued, this business in Europe, this husband, Marcus. Yes, I want to know everything about him. I already have my team on it, he replied, his voice shifting back to pure, cold efficiency. He had recovered quickly. I suspected you would ask. 2 days later, he called me back. I was in my kitchen, wiping down the counters. The news is not good, Mrs. Hayes. The European opportunity was a lie. I stopped wiping, my hands still. Go on. Marcus is not a businessman. He's a con artist. A very good one, but a con artist nonetheless. He has a string of defaulted loans and angry investors here in Atlanta that would choke a horse. My heart didn't even flutter. I had expected it. He didn't go to Europe for a new venture, Mr. Dubois said, his voice grim. He went to escape. He used your daughter to fund his escape, he stated. And the money? I asked, my voice flat. The money she stole from me. It's already gone, Mrs. Hayes. Most of it. These men, they burn through cash. He's likely already laundering it, or has spent it. So there it was. My daughter had traded her mother, her home, and her father's sacred memory for a con man who was already bleeding her dry. The pity I should have felt was absent. All I felt was the cold, hard weight of justice waiting to be served. Thank you, Mr. Dubois. Keep the eviction notice ready. Do not serve it yet. What are we waiting for? He asked. We are waiting for her to come home. And how will you know when she returns? I looked out my kitchen window at Mrs. Bessie watering her azaleas. I won't have to guess, Mr. Dubois. In this neighborhood, the news will travel faster than a telegram. I was right. It happened on a Friday afternoon. I was in my front yard, pruning Samuel's rose bushes. The old Ford truck was parked in the driveway, right under the oak tree, gleaming in the sun. I had spent all morning washing and waxing it. Mrs. Bessie came hurrying down the sidewalk, moving faster than I had ever seen her. She was flapping a piece of junk mail in her hand like a fan, her face flushed with excitement. Evelyn! Evelyn! She panted, her voice a loud whisper as she leaned over my front gate. I immediately put on my poor Evelyn face, my shoulders slumping, my hands looking frail on the pruning shears. Bessie? What on earth is the matter? You look like you've seen a ghost. Evelyn, you won't believe it, she gasped, grabbing her chest. My cousin. You know, my cousin Shonda, who works at the downtown bank. The big one. I think you've mentioned her, I murmured, my heart giving a single hard thump. Well, she called me not 10 minutes ago. She said that Marcus, Denise's husband, he's a wanted man. I put a trembling hand to my chest, my eyes wide. Oh, my heavens. Bessie, no. Yes, a fraud. Defaulted on everything. They're seizing his accounts. They say he's ruined. She leaned in closer, her eyes wide and hungry with the gossip. But that's not even the half of it. What else? I whispered. Shonda said, she said Denise is on a flight back to Atlanta right now. She paused, delivering the final devastating blow. Alone. Mrs. Bessie finally bustled off, her mind filled with enough tragedy and scandal to last her a week. I closed the front door, locking the deadbolt with a quiet, satisfying click. I walked into my sun-filled kitchen. I opened the refrigerator, took out the pitcher of sweet tea, and poured myself a tall, cold glass. I sat down at my kitchen table, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a comfortable shawl. Alone, I said to the empty room. Is that so? I took a slow sip of my tea. It was perfectly sweet. Poor child. I didn't need Mrs. Bessie's breathless report to know what was happening. I had Mr. Dubois. He had already alerted me that morning that Denise's name had appeared on an incoming flight manifest. A last-minute booking, one way. While Mrs. Bessie was picturing the drama, I was picturing the reality. I pictured my daughter walking through the sterile corridors of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. She wouldn't be the same woman who left, laughing, draped in an expensive coat. I pictured her face, pale and puffy, her mascara smudged into dark circles under her eyes, her expensive clothes wrinkled from a 10-hour flight spent in terror. I pictured her standing at the baggage claim, waiting for her single, cheap-looking suitcase. Not the designer luggage she left with. Those I was sure were long gone, sold by Marcus, or pawned. It didn't matter. I pictured her hailing a yellow cab, her hands trembling as she counted out the last of her cash. The cab would pull up to the glittering glass and steel facade of Buckhead Towers. My building? The doorman, Thomas, a good man, would tip his cap. Welcome home, Mrs. Miller. She would probably just nod, unable to meet his eyes, and rush past him. She would ride the silent mirrored elevator up to the penthouse. The doors would whoosh open onto that vast empty apartment. All that white carpet, all those floor-to-ceiling windows, all that cold, expensive silence. I pictured her dropping that one cheap suitcase by the door. I pictured her collapsing on a white leather sofa, the fight finally gone out of her. Marcus was gone. The business was gone. The money, my money, was gone. She was alone, in a cold, empty box, just as she had tried to leave me. I took another sip of tea, savoring the cool sweetness. She would sit there for a long time, I imagined. The shock would be wearing off, replaced by the crushing weight of her own stupidity. But she was not quite alone. I had left her a welcoming gift. Mr. Dubois, ever efficient, had ensured its delivery that very morning. I pictured her, finally pulling herself up, walking to the vast marble kitchen island to get a glass of water. And there she would see it, resting on the gleaming white stone, a single, crisp business envelope, a certified letter. She would be confused. Who would be sending her certified mail? She would see the return address, Robert Investments, Incorporated. I could feel her confusion, her brow furrowing. Robert? That's my father's name. She would think it was a mistake, a strange, cruel coincidence. I pictured her tearing it open, her fingers clumsy with exhaustion and dread. She would pull out the single heavy stock paper. She would read the letterhead again. Robert Investments, Incorporated. She would scan the first few lines, her eyes blurring over the legal language. Dear Ms. Hayes Miller, in accordance with the terms of your lease. Then her eyes would lock onto the two words, centered in bold capital letters. Notice to vacate. She would stagger back. Her hand would fly to her mouth. Her eyes would dart down the page. 30 days. I could almost hear the scream. A high, thin, terrified wail, swallowed instantly by the thick carpets and soundproof walls of my luxury apartment. I pictured her clutching the letter, her mind splintering. Robert? My father? This is impossible. This must be a mistake. I finished my tea. I stood up and placed the glass gently in the sink. It was no mistake, Denise. The lesson was just beginning. I knew she wouldn't call me first. Pride runs deep in my family. She would try to fix it herself. I pictured her, that eviction notice crumpled in her fist. She'd be pacing the white carpet of my penthouse, her voice sharp and arrogant, dialing the building management. This is Denise Miller in the penthouse, she would snap. There has been a ridiculous error. I received some kind of joke. An eviction notice. I could almost hear the polite, cold voice of the building manager, a man Mr. Dubois had already briefed extensively. No, Mrs. Miller, he'd reply, his voice flat. There is no error. But it's from Robert Investments. That's my father's name. It's impossible. I'm sorry, ma'am. The owner, Robert Investments, Incorporated, has chosen not to renew your lease. You must be out in 30 days. Good day. Click. She would stare at her phone. She would try to call Marcus, but his number would be disconnected. She would check her bank accounts, only to find them frozen or empty. Every door she had, every avenue of power, was slamming shut in her face. And now there was only one door left, the one she had tried to lock and board up herself. The door to poor, weak Mom. My phone rang. It shrilled in the quiet of my kitchen, loud and demanding. I let it ring once, twice, a third time. I took a slow sip of my sweet tea, letting the silence of my little house settle around me. On the fourth ring, I picked it up. Hello? I said. My voice was soft, frail, the voice of poor Evelyn. A sound came through the phone, a choked, desperate, gulping gasp. Mom? Mom! It was a wail, the sound of a trapped animal, a sound I hadn't heard from her since she was 5 years old and fell from the swings. Denise? Baby? I said, injecting just the right amount of surprise into my voice. Is that you? Oh my goodness, I thought you were in Europe. He left me, Mom, she screamed. The words tumbled out in a torrent of pure, raw hysteria. He left me in Paris. He was a liar. He took everything, she shrieked, her voice cracking. He took all the money. He was a con man. I feigned a gasp, my hand flying to my chest in a perfect performance of shock. Oh my heavens. Denise, baby, calm down. I can't calm down, she sobbed. And Mom, that's not all. I got this letter. Mom, I'm being evicted. Evicted? I clutched the receiver. Evicted? From your apartment? But why? I don't know, she cried, the lie coming easily to her even now. Some company. It's crazy. It says, Mom, it says Dad's company owns the building. Robert Investments. She was panting now. It's impossible, isn't it? It has to be a mistake. It's some kind of horrible, cruel joke. I stayed silent. I let her spin in her own panic. I let the silence stretch heavy and cold across the phone line. Mom? Her voice was small. Mom, please, it's not a mistake. They're really throwing me out. Her voice dropped to a desperate, watery whisper. I have nowhere to go. I have no money, Mom. He took everything. I'm ruined. She was sobbing now, the ugly, gulping sobs of true terror. Mom, she whispered, her voice cracking. Mommy, please. I have nowhere else to go. I don't know what to do. There it was, the question she had tried so hard to avoid. The last resort. Mom, can I? Her breath hitched. Can I come home? The question hung in the air between us, the perfect false ending. This was the moment. Would the poor, abandoned mother have the heart to turn away her own broken child? Or would she, in her supposed weakness, let the fox back into the henhouse? Just for a little while, she pleaded, sensing my hesitation, her voice desperate. Just until I can get on my feet. I'll sleep in my old room. I won't be any trouble, I promise. Please. I let the silence stretch 1 second longer. I let her feel the cold, sharp edge of no. Then I took a long, slow breath. I let my voice sound tired, resigned, and forgiving. Of course, honey. I heard her sharp, sudden inhale, a gasp of pure, disbelieving relief. This will always be your home. She arrived an hour later in a taxi. She had one cheap suitcase and a cardboard box. I watched from the living room window as she paid the driver, her hands fumbling with a few crumpled bills. When I opened the door, the woman standing there was not my daughter. She was a stranger. Her expensive clothes hung on her like a scarecrow's. Her skin was sallow. Her eyes were hollowed out holes of red and purple. She looked 10 years older. Mom, she whispered, and the single word seemed to take all her remaining strength. Go on up, Denise, I said, my voice gentle. Your old room is just how you left it. She didn't look at me. She just grabbed her suitcase and shuffled past me, her head down, a portrait of pure, unadulterated humiliation. She was home. The first part of my plan was complete. The next few weeks were the hardest performance of my life. I continued to be poor Evelyn. I made simple dinners, beans and rice, chicken soup. Denise, who was used to fine dining in Buckhead, ate every bite without complaint. Her creditors started calling my house, their voices hard and demanding. Denise would sit at the kitchen table on my phone, pleading with them. Please, she'd beg, her voice thin. I don't have anything. He took it all. Please, just give me time. But they didn't have time. They wanted their money. One evening, I came into the living room and found her sitting on the floor, her old jewelry box open, her wedding ring, her diamond earrings, the gold bracelet Marcus had given her. She was lining them up on the carpet, her face a mask of stone. What are you doing, honey? I asked softly. I'm selling them, she said, her voice flat. It's all I have left. It's not much, but it might buy me a few more weeks. I watched my daughter, who had sold my sacred memories for an adventure, now forced to sell her own cheap, meaningless trinkets just to survive. But it wasn't enough. The debts were too big. The jewelry, it was just a drop in the ocean. I found a job, she told me a week later. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Oh, honey, that's wonderful, I said, feigning cheer. Where at? She took a deep breath. It's a night shift, cleaning offices, downtown. My heart, the mother part of my heart, gave a sharp, painful twist. My daughter, my brilliant, college-educated daughter, was going to be a janitor. The pay is terrible, she whispered, but it's cash, and they don't care about my credit. I watched her that night, putting on an old pair of my sneakers because her own expensive shoes weren't practical. I watched her walk out the door, her shoulders slumped, into the dark. I watched her come home at 4 a.m., her face gray with exhaustion, smelling of bleach and floor wax. She would shower, sleep for a few hours, and then spend all day on the phone with lawyers and creditors. And I, her millionaire mother, would hand her a cup of hot coffee and pretend I had nothing else to offer. Then, the shift began. It was subtle. She stopped crying about Marcus. She stopped complaining about her bad luck. One morning, she came into the kitchen, her eyes clear for the first time in months. She sat down across from me. "Mom," she said, her voice quiet. I'm so sorry." I paused, my cup halfway to my lips. "Sorry for what, honey?" Not for Marcus. Not for the money. I'm sorry. For you." She looked at me, really looked at me. "I did a terrible thing to you. I abandoned you. I took your home. I took Dad's truck. I was a monster." She wasn't crying. She wasn't asking for anything. It was a simple, flat statement of fact. I wanted you to know that. I know I can't fix it, but I know what I did." I just nodded, my heart pounding. "I appreciate that, Denise." It was time. She was ready. The next morning, I said, "Denise, I was at church, and Mrs. Bessie's cousin, she mentioned a lawyer, a Mr. Dubois. She said he sometimes helps people in situations like yours. Maybe we could just go talk to him." Hope, a small painful flicker, lit her eyes. "A lawyer?" "Mom, I can't pay a lawyer. I can't even pay my light bill. He does a free consultation," I lied. Let's just go see." "What can it hurt?" She agreed. We rode the bus downtown. She looked small and frail in her old, worn-out clothes. When we walked into the 40th floor lobby, with its silent gray carpet and vast glass walls, her hand gripped my arm. "Mom, this is not a free lawyer's office." "It's okay, honey," I soothed. "We're just here to talk." Mr. Dubois was waiting. He was the perfect picture of corporate power. He greeted me with a polite "Mrs. Hayes." He turned to my daughter. "Miss Hayes," he said. He did not use her married name. We sat in the leather chairs. Denise was perched on the edge, looking like a sparrow about to fly. "Denise," Mr. Dubois began, his voice calm and professional, "I've been asked to review your case. The debts your ex-husband, Marcus, left you with. The fraudulent loans. It's a nightmare," she whispered, wringing her hands. They're going to ruin me." Mr. Dubois simply pushed a thick file across his gleaming desk. "Those debts, Miss Hayes," he said, "they have been taken care of." Denise just stared at him. What do you mean, taken care of?" "They've been paid," he said, "in full." Denise's head snapped back as if he'd struck her. "Paid? But how? By who? I don't understand." Her eyes darted around the room, wild with confusion, and landed on me. "Mom? Did you?" She looked at me, poor Evelyn, in my simple house dress, and the question died on her lips. It was impossible. I said nothing. I just reached down into my old leather purse. I pulled out a single thick folder. The final folder. I slid it across the polished wood. Her hand trembling opened it. The first page was the deed to the Buckhead Towers. Her eyes scanned the page. Robert Investments, Incorporated. Owner. She turned the page. A bank statement with a number that had 7 zeros. She turned the page. The voided sale document for the house on Tybee Island. She turned the page. The bill of sale for one 1998 Ford pickup truck. She looked up. Her face was bloodless. Her eyes were wide, vacant with a shock so profound it had no sound. She looked at the name on the documents. Then she looked at me. "How?" she whispered. "By whom?" I leaned forward, my hands folded on his desk, and for the first time in her entire life, my daughter saw who I truly was. "By the owner of your building, Denise," I said. "Me." The mask was off. My voice was not poor Evelyn's. It was cold, clear, and unyielding. Dad's company? I am Dad's company. The money you stole? It was a drop in the bucket. The house you sold? I bought it back the next day. The truck you threw away? It's in my driveway. It's been there for weeks. She was broken. Utterly, completely, and finally broken. But why? She choked, the tears finally coming, not tears of pity, but tears of pure, shattering comprehension. Why? Why did you let me? The janitor job? She whispered, horrified. Yes, I said. I let you suffer. I let you hit the bottom of the pit you dug for yourself. Because you didn't just steal my money. You stole my dignity. You stole your father's memory. I stood up, looming over her. I couldn't give you back your soul, Denise. I had to let you earn it back. Denise just sat there in that multi-million-dollar office, completely undone. The truth in all its cold, hard, and terrible glory settled over us. Mr. Dubois, ever the professional, quietly stood and left the room, closing the heavy door behind him. He left the two of us alone, high above the city, with the ruins of our old life. She didn't get angry. She didn't scream. She didn't make excuses. She just bent over, putting her head in her hands, and she wept. They were not the hysterical sobs of her return. They were the deep, racking, silent tears of true repentance. I was a monster, she whispered into her hands. I was nothing. No, I said, my voice softer now. The ice was gone, the lesson delivered. You were lost, and you were selfish, but you were not a monster. I sat back down. Your father, he left all this to protect me, but he also left it for you. He just wanted you to be whole before you received it. She looked up, her face a mess of tears and dawning comprehension. You did this. For me? You let me scrub floors. You let me beg. For me? You had to learn, Denise, I said gently. I couldn't tell you the value of dignity. I couldn't buy you a new conscience. You had to find it. In the dark. On your hands and knees. Just like I did. She finally understood. It wasn't revenge, it was an education. The hardest, most expensive, and most painful education of her life. The rebuilding was slow. It was not a movie magic moment. When we left that office, she didn't quit her job. I was surprised. Mom, she said that evening as she was putting on her old sneakers. I'm still going. You don't have to, I told her. You know you don't. I know, she said, tying the laces, but that woman, the one who hired me, she's not the woman I want to be, but the one who finishes the job. She is. So she kept working. She scrubbed those floors at night, and during the day, she didn't go shopping. She didn't move back to the penthouse. She enrolled in night school at the community college. Social work, she told me, her eyes clear and steady. I think I understand people in a way I never did before. People who are at the bottom. I think I can help. She insisted on paying for her own tuition. She used the money she earned from her cleaning job. She insisted on paying me rent. A small amount, but it was the principal. She paid for her own groceries. She was earning her way back, not just to my good graces. She was earning her way back to herself. 6 months passed. The woman who now lived in my house was not the child who had left. She was a colleague. She was a partner. She was strong, in a way her husband's stolen money could never make her. We decided to go to Tybee Island, together. We drove down in Samuel's truck. I let her drive. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her father's hands. The beach house was just as I remembered it. The salt air, the sound of the ocean, the blue porch. We didn't just sit. We had work to do. We brought paint, a big can of white paint and a smaller can of deep ocean blue. We had a new sign, a large piece of driftwood Samuel had saved that we were sanding and painting. Denise painted the letters, her hand sure and steady. It didn't say the Hayes house. It read, the Samuel Hayes Sanctuary. I painted the smaller letters underneath. A new beginning for families. We were turning the site of the betrayal into a shelter, a place for women escaping financial abuse, a place to get on their feet. Denise's first project for her social work degree. My first project for Robert Investments. When the paint was dry, we hung the sign over the front porch, right where the old peeling house number used to be. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. I looked at the sign. I looked at the house. I looked at the daughter standing next to me. He would be so proud, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Denise didn't say anything. She just reached out and took my hand. Her hand was strong, calloused, and real. I know, Mom, she said, her voice full of a peace I had never heard from her before. And I'm proud of you. Samuel may be gone, but his wisdom and love still lives on through the sanctuary we built, and in my daughter's new purpose. Thank you, my dear friends, for walking this road with me. If this story touched your heart, I'd truly love to hear from you. Tell me, what city or country are you listening from, dear? Rate this story from 0 to 10 so I can see how far true family legacy can travel. Feels like sitting on the porch with family, just heart to heart. May God's peace and clarity be with you always.